Welcome. This is the Changing Times, Changing Worlds Otherworldly show. And we are here to explore topics of interest to people who are interested in the occult, in the paranormal, in the supernatural, the metaphysical. If it's hidden in the shadows, we're going to bring it out and talk about it. And I am Tchipakkan, your host, and tonight is the day after solstice. And we're going to be talking about solstice tonight. Next week, next week is going to be 2 days before the end of the New Year under current our way of looking at New Year's. And we'll be talking about New Year customs.
Thank you, Pope Gregory.
We are going to be talking about solstice tonight. I've been reviewing some of my fun things on the solstice, including I got a book that I really like. This book. I have bought several copies. I don't know, you're seeing too much reflection from the screen on it, but it's called The Winter Solstice: Sacred Traditions of Christmas by John and Caitlin Matthews.
Okay.
But there's lots and lots of other things. What I'm interested in is that there are lots of, while New Year's, as we'll get into next week, is arbitrary. There are New Year's around the world, around the calendar. Solstice is an astronomical event, and therefore it happens, and it also has certain effects. It doesn't have the same effect everywhere. In the tropics, between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of, did I say that right?
Capricorn.
Cancer and Capricorn, yeah.
They don't really have the same issue that we have of the nights getting long and the days getting short. That's not something that they experience. Not that they don't have that same interest in the solstices. I think it goes without saying that we are celebrating the summer solstice down the southern hemisphere. They're celebrating their summer solstice. It's whichever is the opposite that's going on.
Got wished a happy solstice by a friend of mine down in Oz.
And being that it's just above the, I think it's just above, I'm not sure. The Inti Raymi is the solstice celebration for the Incan sun god, and which used to be a lot more exciting than it is now. Now they do put on some ancient costumes, and they used to get their mummified ancestors out of the tombs and parade them through the streets before they then sacrificed hundreds of llamas. Now they have a sacrifice of a symbolic, not real llama, and leave the ancestors buried. But and in Bolivia, they celebrate since they became Christian, they are celebrating as San Tomas Day, and but they are still using many of the pre-Incan ceremonies, including some of the guys climb up these ridiculously tall poles and then hang themselves from them, and so they're spinning around like a carousel by their feet off of these actually high. It's called
They do
sky
that in
dancing.
Mexico too.
And they like to do that, and then I think it may be, it's just the Native Americans in South America did a wonderful job of fusion between their native religion and the one that was imposed upon them by their overlord. So that is one of the coolest things, and probably one of the things that the points that I want to be making today is that traditions are not, we act like they last forever and they're the same. The Victorians were very big on assuming that if you went somewhere that was far enough away from the center of culture or London, you would find, or Berlin, I suppose, if you're German. But if you go deep enough into the woods, you'll find something that hasn't been changed. Forgetting that as soon as the antiquarians started looking this stuff up and it started spreading around, people started doing Egyptian things, people started doing Viking things. The whole Opelia ceremony where they burn a Viking ship at the end of the season in Scotland, pretty much created by returning soldiers from the Napoleonic Wars, who thought Vikings were cool and therefore they were going to do Viking things. And so they dressed up with helmets with horns on them and burned a Viking ship. And they're still doing it, and because it's fun. But we really should see our customs and our expressions of our spirituality as dynamic, as evolving. We keep looking for what are the origins of it, and fighting over pagan origins of Christian customs, what are the Christian origins of pagan activities. And the okay, we got a comment. German historians know that Berlin is a German. Okay, you had to be from Trier or Mainz or Oslo. Yeah, right. All those Roman colonies for tradition. Yeah, that's it. Many of our traditions in Europe are indeed based on Roman Saturnalia, which itself during the empire went from a 5-day festival to a 7-day festival, because emperors love to put their own mark on any celebration that was going on, and that was a thing. We need, but opposite, aside from it's dynamic and evolving, there is a what is standard, what is no, what is real, what isn't changed, what is, it's an astronomical event. Newgrange. Now I think we only dug up Newgrange in my lifetime. They discovered Newgrange, they dug it up, and then they discovered, whoa, look, the light comes in and it hits the back wall at the solstice. I think it's the solstice, isn't it? For all of about 10 minutes or something. And so people crowd around, and they have people keeping them away from the doorway so that doesn't fall, so they don't stop the sun from getting back there, because you can't fit everybody in. But we keep learning new things, but some things are real. And one of those things that are real is you get less, because the earth is tipped. We have days that get longer and days that get shorter. I've had some great pictures on the internet lately of showing where the sun sits at the same time every day, and it's a very cool thing to realize how the sun rises and sets higher and lower, and the sun and the days are shorter and longer. And I know personally that when it comes to short days, and this is aggravated in my experience with daylight saving time, but short days get to me in a very visceral level. And our ancestors, probably, who didn't have electric lights, probably felt it even more, especially the farther north you go, farther, the shorter your days are going to be. And yes, they do have midnight sun in the summer, but in the winter, they get three months of dark. And if you're up high enough, and that's going to have a major impact. Here we go. A place in Orkney, Meso, there's the sun coming in for about 10 days. Main chamber of the Viking inscription is very low culture. Yes. Well, not all culture is high culture. But thank you. But yeah, but the days get short. There's less light. Up here, well, anywhere where it's north or south, but I think I'm going to be comfortable talking about north, is it gets cold. It gets very cold, and you need insulation and firewood and such to be able to survive the winter. It's also the point in the year when you can harvest your meat, and people don't like to think of it as harvesting, but they're just the slaughtering time of year. That's why they call it Bloodmonth. This blood month, it's the month of sacrificing the kid, because when you are slaughtering what you're not going to be keeping through the winter, you want to do it when it is cold enough so that the meat won't go over immediately. You want the cold to be enough to keep the flies down. And yes, you do salt or preserve it as much as you can, but that is the fat month. That is the month in which you get to eat meat, if you're a meat-eating culture. And other than that, when you eat meat, you're eating a lamb or a kid or a small animal that you can eat immediately.
Oops.
Well, does anyone else have comments about the solstice that we can talk about, Washington?
Well,
the other thing
I-
I picked up recently was an explanation of why the solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, is not the same day as the day of the earliest sunrise. And it has to do with the fact that our days aren't 24 hours long. So they drifted over the years. But otherwise, as far as celebrations, yeah, the whole concept of the Festival of Sol Invictus, the Feast of the Unconquered Sun, which is to reassure people that, yes, you're freezing to death in your cheap little houses with no food, but this too shall pass.
Mhm.
So, so much is bound up in that notion. I guess this was the most dangerous time of the year.
Mhm.
And if you weren't ready, it's like we talk about how hard life was in New Hampshire, where we lived for a while. Mistakes in preparation for winter could be fatal.
Yeah.
And it was a hard place to live. So the idea of any kind of festival, well, first of all, accurately predicting when the hard kick in the ass was coming
Mhm.
was critically important. And just as it was, when do you plant? When do you harvest? When do you take a nap?
Yeah.
And if you got this wrong, you could die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That probably explains all the traditions my parents told me about during the dark part of the year, where people went around to see their neighbors. They were checking on each other, making sure everyone
Well, yeah.
was okay.
Well, it's,
Starting-
like
Yeah, starting right after Halloween, they'd have St. Martin's Day, when people would go around from house to house collecting pennies, kind of like the penny for the guy. During the Advent, people would be checking on each other. In the 12 nights, like coming up right now, you'd have people dressed up as the three kings and going from house to house. It's like,
Make sure everyone has
make
food to
sure
get by. and-
everyone's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of funny too, because I keep thinking about that. Because Jen calls her mom every day. I should be calling Uncle Danny every day, but I haven't quite gotten into that groove. But
You're getting there.
the refrain is, okay, we're alive, you're alive. And it's half joking, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And we do this all year round because we all have our issues. But, you know, in this time of year when it's colder than it looks outside, and you now know why people call this Sibiricuse.
Yeah.
Because the cold just cuts right through you.
Yeah, and
And
the cold and the danger is the point. I think
hmm
this is the time of year when the wild hunt was traveling,
mhm.
and this was the time of year when it's an entire season. They talk about it being around Samhain, but it's
Oh dear.
Again.
Yep.
But yeah, it is a whole season.
hmm
You realize that the growing is over, the harvesting has
We do.
happened, the survival has begun.
We lost you again, Tchipakkan.
Yeah, I saw that. I think I'm back.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, you
Yep.
are.
At least for the
Okay.
moment.
Basically, it's a time of danger, and we have to watch them. But it is also that there are certain things that they always seem to have. One is a lot have to do with heat and fire. There's a lot of
Mhm.
gift exchange. There's
Mhm.
much feasting, which is probably called because of it's the right time of year for that. You have time. One of the
Yes.
things that modern pagans don't seem to get is the neo-pagans want to have this neatly every 6 weeks or whatever it is, have a holiday. Doesn't have that because people were working. Harvest was the first major holiday. You got your what? It wasn't until the work was done. This was the period when there was not much you could do during the agricultural year, and up until the 20th century, 90% of the population was agricultural.
Right. And there just wasn't squat to do in the middle of winter.
And
Well, actually,
Oh.
there.
during that part of the year, that was when you got to do the social stuff. So it's all about the light, the fire, the warmth. That's why you have candles. In the
Mhm.
Roman period, lamps, candles, oil, and foods were pretty much the gifts.
And people
Mhm.
would take up crafts at that time of year. It was time for contemplation and crafting and creativity as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pass the time while you're making sure the fire stays fed, for instance.
Well, and anything that you can do in whatever is the light of the fire.
Yes.
The book,
Right.
The World by Fire. It's a great thing to remind people about how we the amount of light that we get now is
It's incredible.
playing havoc with culture and everything else. But almost every culture has certain foods they eat. Another thing that is very common, having to do once again with the survival, is going around and various begging festivals. You would go and beg.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was
Hogmanay.
noticeably. It was also a kind of, in any culture in which there was a great deal of economic disparity, it became
Mhm.
role reversal became a standard part of their midwinter celebrations. Cross-dressing, the giving of clothes and the giving of food to a certain extent, and I hate to say it, but it's crowd control. It's a safety valve. Frederick Douglass called Christmas for slaves in the South a safety valve that prevented insurrection. They would give winter clothing, they would give blankets, they would give extra food and whiskey and the time off to the slaves, because without that, he figured that they probably would have risen up a lot more. You see the same thing in the Roman Empire, and what some people don't realize is a lot of Southern culture, you know those big mansions with the pillars on the front? The South was attempting to recreate Roman culture.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
As they
Yeah.
understood it or misunderstood it, and they weren't able to do what they'd hoped to do, which is to just continue expanding into the Native Americans and take them as slaves and then make them part of it and expand their territory and make them, well, basically,
Right.
let's put it this way, Rome, that stopped working for Rome when they hit the Germanics. And
Yeah, they didn't take too well to that.
and that happened in Georgia when they hit the Native Americans. It's
Yeah.
like,
Right. But,
I'm
you know,
sorry,
I keep thinking,
we are too free and we are not going to put up with this bullshit. I probably should.
but it kind of reminds me of this, one of the little themes I've picked up on is that Nashville, when we were watching this really long series by Ken Burns about country music, one of the things that popped up was Nashville really hated country music when it came out because they regarded themselves as, quote, the Athens of the South. And it really lands on that same concept of what they thought their culture was. So that fits right in.
Yeah, and there was, there's an incredible equivalency between the way the Black slaves were allowed to and encouraged to. There was a custom called John Canoe that really looks very similar to wassailing, that they would go to people's homes and they would sing and they would do dances, and then they would demand money and drinks. So one person would carry a jug and they would put whiskey into it and they would take it back home and sing and dance themselves and eat. But they gave out a lot of food. They would give them their Frederick Douglass at least claims that they intentionally gave them so much that it would make them ill. They were intentionally trying to make it look like, if you have freedom, you poor stupid people are going to make yourselves sick. So it's good that you're slaves and we'll just tell you what to do and take care of you. On the other hand, by and large, they got meat once a year. They got the white upper class could feel really good and Christian by making them cakes and giving them meat and giving them food and stuff, but they would restrict. They would withhold privileges and they would withhold days off, etc. if they didn't want to, in order to get them to behave themselves. And this one day of freedom was I don't want to get too into that, but it was the going around. They would dress up in clothes with bells on.
Mhm.
They would sing with musical instruments, sing and dance, and collect money and booze from the rich people. And they would sometimes sing disparaging songs. You know, you could they didn't have the right to actually threaten as the English wassailers would do is that, butler, bring up the bowl of the best, and hope that your soul in heaven may rest. But if you bring up a bowl of the small, and down will go butler, bowl and all. There was the threat of violence in England in wassailing, and there's many, many wassailing songs depending on the region. But a lot of it had to do with, we will bless you if you give us stuff, and if we will beat you up if you don't give us the same. And they would be giving them the good booze. They would be given, the master would be drinking with the peasants from his estate, and he would give them the good stuff because he was drinking it with them. And see, we're all drinking the same thing. Isn't that lovely?
Mhm.
Once a year, you get the good stuff, and you're probably only getting it because you'd notice that he was drinking the good stuff himself and giving you the crap. In the similar way, they would they shared, but they were giving themselves the psychological feeling that they were being good Christians and taking care of these poor inferior beings.
Mhm.
But that was not, but in the South, they could not threaten the butler. What they would do is they would make fun of them, and they would say, "Oh, Massa's so poor," so they say. "Massa can't afford to give us a penny," so they say. Massa hasn't got enough food to share," so they say.
Mhm.
And similar snarky, mocking things. They would work on embarrassing them to get their own way, which that's about as much as they could do in the rural South, which it's really annoying, but
It
does.
sounds so much the Jewish approach to things like, oh, he should break his leg, God forbid.
Yeah.
And the God forbid thing is always like, I didn't really mean that, or just joking. But
Bless her heart.
Bless her heart, yes. That's another one. But I was thinking, first of all, it says that there's a lot of Lord of Misrule
Mhm.
in this whole concept,
Mhm.
which applies in other places.
Mm.
But I had
Back to
also
solstice.
picked up the Pagan Book of Days,
Good one.
and 17 December, Saturn Ops, first day of Saturnalia, ran for 7 days, known for its extravagant decadence. Slaves are allowed to meet their masters on equal terms, and in this season of goodwill, the greeting was Bona Saturnalia, and this is where we get Christmas. You also could talk about running around begging for food. 31 December, Hogmanay.
That's
Mhm.
a different one, yeah. But there's a lot of ones. But one of the things that I was very amused to discover was the I-O Saturnalia. That was the traditional greeting. Was pronounced yo.
Yo!
Yo, Saturnalia. Yo, Saturnalia. I was like, I kind of like that, but
Uh-huh.
Yeah, great ideas persist through history. Yo!
Saturnalia. Anyway, the another one that I particularly like, in Japan, they like to go bathing in hot springs
Mhm.
for the solstice. With there's a kind of a citrus fruit or that they will that floats apparently, and it's supposed to give you longevity if you're sitting there. I've seen, you can Google it and you can see pictures of people sitting in hot springs with all these golden apples or oranges or whatever they are floating around them. Or they like to have take photographs now, film of is it wombats? Some large rodent likes to go into the hot springs as well and eat the fruits. And so they
Really?
like to
Because I'm aware of the hot springs in Japan where the monkeys
Yeah,
Well, yeah, where
The
the
eighth gland,
Japanese
rather.
macaques, well, the Japanese macaques
Yeah.
who,
but
and
the solstice was the myth going with that with the Shinto one was the goddess Amaterasu, who was the sun goddess coming out of her cave. She had gotten
Mhm.
crossed because the darkness had been playing games and not doing it right, and she so she went into a cave, and therefore here you have the sun is not coming out as much.
right,
And so the world was suffering, and so another goddess of performance, I think, one of was the one who got her to come out on the solstice by doing a dance during
Yes.
which well, we wouldn't, it would be inappropriate to say that she was doing a striptease, but she was supposed to have been exposing herself
Mhm.
in a way that made the other gods laugh. And so Amaterasu got curious, what are they all laughing about out there? And so she went back out, and she found the let's see, was it Amen O Uzumi? God, yes, you look it up. AMENOUZUME was basically doing a ribald dance, exposing herself, and so Amaterasu came out, and they blocked the doorway so she couldn't get back in, and thus the light came back to the earth. Because the other Kami made sure that she couldn't make it all dark again. So that is a cool thing.
Yes.
It's a lovely, it's another story, and they will continue to make up myths to explain natural phenomena, which is that it gets darker in the winter and it gets light again, and we desperately need the light, whether it is Demeter or whether it's Amaterasu. The solstice in Persia is Shamos, which is their winter solstice, and they do poetry and eating and candles. Gee, more of that. In India, the Hindu sun god they have bonfires. Gee, more bonfires. Bonfires are pretty ubiquitous at solstice. Last year in India, one of the things that they do in Lori, which is their solstice celebration, they like to fly kites. And apparently they were flying kites off the tops of their roofs last year during the lockdown. And the kite makers complained that they had run out of stock because everybody was flying kites off their roofs. The Hopi celebrate Soyal, which is a ancestor. They have the Kachina dancers, like they have the Kachina dolls that represent the ancestors, and they dance, and they make it fires, and they exchange calendars and socks. So, okay, exchanging socks is something that's going to keep you warm. There's a lot of role reversal. There's a lot of disguising. You get a lot of the I think a lot of the Krampus, Black Pete, Belsnickel, a lot of these people, a lot of it has to do with young men who have a lot of social pressure on them to behave, wanting a chance to misbehave, and they get in costume so that they can go out and get away with it. A more recent solstice celebration is in Brighton in England, where they have big bonfires, but this goes all the way back to 1994, ancient custom. And they and they burn the clocks. And so they make these huge lantern, they're big paper, light paper constructions shaped like mythical beings and clocks. And they represent time and bosses and government and everything that you don't like. And
Regulation.
so they parade them through town, take them down to the beach, and then set them all on fire and burn them all. And that is a modern. And remember, I was trying to say it evolves. It's what people need. It's what your culture needs. Your culture is terribly repressive. You have to have the safety valve. If your culture is very, I think this may have something to do with why Krampus has suddenly gotten so popular. People want to have the, they like the idea of somebody coming and getting the bad guys and stuffing them in the sack and carrying them off. It's like,
I have this vision of the Krampus shoving Boris Johnson into a sack.
Indeed.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I heard last week, it has not really having to do with solstice, but the term jolly comes from Yule, J-U-L, and that's where we get our word jolly. So that's why jolly.
Oh, a Yule. So he's a Yule old elf.
Things that
Holly
rhyme
Jolly
with-
Christmas.
Yeah. That's why we mostly don't use the term jolly except for Santa Claus.
When I was a kid, Santa Claus, or rather the Nikolaus, would come around, and he didn't need a Krampus, because the first thing he'd do was he'd ask every kid how they'd been naughty, and they'd get a token spanking. And he'd threaten to put them in his bag. And then he'd actually open the bag and the gifts would come out. It happened every
I like that
year.
version better.
A family friend put on it wasn't exactly a Santa suit. It was much darker and spookier than that. We'd never actually met a mall Santa by that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, he didn't need a Krampus. He was the Krampus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I read about in Holland where they would do that, and they would have the Saint Nicholas or Father Christmas figure would come in, and he would invest, and he would talk to all the kids and ask them how they'd been, and then having been prepared, being one of the neighbors in an outfit, he reminded them of something that they had done and they thought they'd gotten away with and that their parents didn't know about, but their parents did. And gosh, that strikes me as being terrifying for the kids, to suddenly discover that you didn't necessarily get away with the thing that you thought you'd gotten away with. It's like, oh no, because that struck me. I don't think you can get the same level of power in a supernatural figure if they don't have the power to. How can they have the power to defend and be strong if they haven't got the power to punish? They've got to be a little terrifying, or they wouldn't. But wouldn't be able to fulfill the entire function. Let's see what else. Let's see, what are other things that, let's see, Dimash is this Tibetan celebration of the dying year, lasting 5 days. The festival's got a magical pole covered with stars, crosses and pentagrams made of string, and dancers in hideous masks to frighten away the evil spirits. And there's feasting again, and prayers that fill the day, and then the pole is torn down, and on the 5th day. Always feasting. Quite often, a lot of noise is made. Why? To drive bad spirits away. Another thing they will in some places they do is open the window, the door to let the spirit, the good spirits in, or let the old spirits out. But that's more for New Year's. There's one that's associated with this dark time of the year in Japan, which is the Feast of the Broken Needles, Hari Koyo, which I'm probably butchering again, in which the people who work with needles all year round, if their needles are broken, I've gotten lost again. That they bring their broken and bent needles and they put them in slabs of tofu, which are then the needles get their final resting place at sea, and people wrap their tofu in paper and launch them out to sea, which doesn't strike me as a great thing to for the sea creatures.
Or the environment, yeah.
Well, yeah.
When there were only 1 million people in the world, or only 1 billion, it was something you get away with. But at this time of year, we do tend to begin to think of the rest of nature as part of it. We start putting offerings out for the Nissa and the Tomta, and we wassail the apple trees. We will drink to the health of the trees, which you're getting the cider, which they couldn't, you wouldn't get except for them. They wassail the bees. They drink to the health of, apparently drinking to somebody's health is actually supposed to be good for them.
Well, I remember an old saying, I've drunk to your health in taverns. I've drunk to your health at home. I've drunk to your health so many times, I've completely ruined my own.
Yeah. Now one of the things in our house that we do is we have a candle, which my father had these big candles that I was selling about this big around the bottom, that tall. They were friggin' big candle. And I got one and I lit it at sunset ceremonially. I think it was 1974. And we stayed up all night eating and drinking and dancing. They especially had dancing in the last hour before the sun rose at about 7:15 where we were, and then we would blow the candle out. And I used that for many, many years. Finally, it got down so that it was burned down to the center. So I melted it down, added more beeswax. We are probably this year ready to melt down the outer ring because we're down to the bottom again. I think this time I am not going to use an oatmeal cylinder as the mold. I will use something else, but I like switching over to beeswax because it just seems more sacred to me. And so
Smells
this will be
nicer,
the
too.
third one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and burns hotter. But we're going to probably, the chances are my kids will continue to light the solstice candle at sunset and then blow it out at sunrise for the longest night of the year. That's ours. Do any of you have something that you do for solstice?
Well, not that we do specifically, but that you mentioned the dimensions of it. And it so totally reminds me of the Paschal candle that we had at our church, which was about the same diameter, but much taller.
Mm.
And this thing was meant to burn like for years. But otherwise, we don't specifically do solstice. She just showed a candle in a holder, and that's a small beeswax taper.
These are designed to burn for exactly 1 hour. They're the right length to burn
and
that long.
So, and you're right about the beeswax, because we actually had some beeswax tea lights to use in our oil infusers, and they overheated the things. So, But otherwise, yeah, the idea of lighting lights in the darkness, but well, for Jen at least, it's a more common thing than it is for me to light a
we
candle.
have a lot of tensions about the stations of the year,
Hmm.
but we never quite get our brain cells to stop flickering enough to.
Yeah, and so I actually had this out because I was looking for the quarters and the cross quarters and all the stations of the year so that we can be more mindful of them. And whether we light a taper or set our foot on fire or whatever, uh, just so that you notice it's there.
Yeah.
We would give gifts. I had solstice feasts. Well, we haven't had them in the during the
Plague years.
Unpleasantness.
but we used to have. I'd have lots of people, and I have such a variety of friends that I needed to have at least 4 or 5 rooms because most of my friends would not get along with each other.
I remember we were at least one of those.
Need to have them in different rooms, but we would sometimes have gift exchanges, and I would specify something small, something that you would not expect to last for more than a year, so maybe it's edible, or bring and we bring a food. I of course provided more cookies than sanity allows, and
I guess that rules out fruitcake if it only lasts a year.
well, it depends on whether or not you like fruitcake. Some people do.
I love it.
I do.
At my age, I finally, it depends on the fruitcake. There's so many different recipes out there.
Oh Lord, yeah.
I wouldn't rule it out. I have yet to taste one that I like. So
There's
Well,
some that are, and the ones that my mother used to get in the mail, I couldn't stand, but I make a fine fruitcake now.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm still
my
trying to
attitude-
recreate my Nana's chocolate fruitcake recipe.
Chocolate
Oh,
fruitcake.
about
isn't it?
chocolate, yeah. But the idea
Yeah.
is you have all kinds of fruit and just enough of something edible to bind it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have, and then I will mention here mince pies, because
Oh, yay, mince pie.
something I like mince pies. When I was a kid, my father would get deer every year, and the last of the mince meat would go into the mince meat pie.
oh, so you ate actually minced meat
And
pie.
venison mince meat, they're delicious.
Mm.
But I discovered that mince pies are not usually a pie shape. They're usually little things, and they were traditionally shared. And in England, they would say, "Have a month of luck," when they offered you a pie, because each pie you ate brought you a month of luck during the year. So you wanted to get 12 mince pies during the Christmas season. However,
Well, that's different.
It only counts if it's from a different cook or a different kitchen. Therefore, and if you think about it, this is going to enhance the community. It's going to make you go around to other people's houses so that you can get a different mince pie at each different house. You want to go to visit at least 12 different friends. And there's stories of during the First World War, when people would do anything to try and hope their sons would come, and brothers and husbands would come home. The women would make a batch of mince pies and go around trading them around the village so they could send their sons 12 different mince pies over at the front. So in a desperate attempt to give them luck to get home. And can you imagine being a guy, one of the doughboys, opening up a package, and there's all your mates who you like and your life depends on around you, looking at them, and yes, you would like to get home yourself, but can you deny luck to your friends?
Right, so you pass it around.
So you're going to pass it around, but that idea of mince pies for luck is, I just think that it's such a brilliant community serving.
And you know what that extends to today? There are all these cookie exchanges where a group of women get together and they each bring a dozen of each type of cookie they make or something, and
Yeah.
They get exchanged around. So everybody
Yeah,
goes
we
home with
used-
12 different kinds of cookies.
We used to do huge amounts of cookies because Kathy, being a minister's daughter, they had to make immense amounts of cookies to give away at this time of year.
Oh,
Right.
That
right.
used to be a weekend for us.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of funny. You talk about mincemeat, and I realized that mincemeat once meant minced actual
Yeah.
meat. But I grew up in a different tradition called lower middle class North American, where mincemeat wasn't quite the same. But I have this memory of a Thanksgiving dinner, and I must have been at most in high school. And we had the usual, you know, we did the turkey, we did everything. And I don't know whether she baked it or bought it, but Mom got a 2.5 pound brandy mince pie. And it was there with the pumpkin pie and all the other pies. Nobody else was interested in it. And in the course of the day, one slice at a time, I ate the whole damn thing myself.
Uh-oh, that's a lot of dried fruit.
Yeah, well,
Well, the fruit
But-
will be balanced by the meat. So actually,
no,
No.
It was not the type of pie that had meat in it, I don't think.
no, this was just all, well, they said brandy mince. It probably had some brandy poured in and then cooked off. It was tasty
Yeah.
though.
oh
I
no,
doubt it was
no,
Yeah.
cooked off much either.
the brandy is not put in until you've done cooking.
Yeah.
Oh.
The brandy,
Supposed to pour it in
And
after. It's a preservative.
it's
Yeah.
the
Maybe
preservative.
that's why it tasted so good.
Yeah.
Did you sleep
And-
real
but
well that
it-
night?
There's
Probably did.
but
Yeah,
drinking, letting your restraints down, letting your hair down, as we say these days, but just letting go of your inhibitions, letting society ideas go is the big thing that we're not going to have. This is one of the things that is pretty universal, no matter where it is, whether you're hopping to hot spring in Japan or watching some guy dangle from a pole in Bolivia. But the music, bonfires are big because it's light. It's a reaffirmation that the light will come back. And in the Donzi, the Chinese one, it's a celebration of the yin and the yang. They're going from the yin time of the year to the yang time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And in Korea, they eat red bean porridge. Every place they have some foods that are specific, and this is going to be personal, practically from family to family. Yes, culture to culture, but it's also going to be family to family. But what is you have to have is different from, and of course, in a melting pot like America, we have so many choices that each of us can, at different times. Our family, we tried the goose, and we tried the turkey, and we tried the ham, and now our family is pretty much settled in on the roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. That's what our family wants for our Christmas dinner.
That's what I tended to make for my in-laws.
And I still prefer latkes.
Oh, yeah,
That we
but
make.
latkes are great. Apparently, the entire brouhaha about Hanukkah, they had the story of the recovery of the temple, but the whole 8 candles, the 8 lamps,
Yes.
wasn't a thing until the 17th century.
Really?
Hanukkah, that aspect of it, didn't come up until it became exposed to Christian Christmas, and therefore,
It
and
needed a
when you
miracle.
see Kwanzaa is a response to the American pressures, and we're saying, no, damn it. The black people are saying, we're going to create our own fusion. We're going to take our African roots and we're going to take our American stuff and we're going to make a fusion and make a holiday that's ours. It's an African American holiday. We're doing it our way.
Tradition and
Right.
history
It's just
and-
like,
Beautiful
not a
way.
holiday.
We're going to celebrations. The Saturnalia, whatever whatever the solstice celebration is going to be personal to your culture and your community, and it will change. And I guess that was the point I wanted to end up on, is that don't consider it a. Yes, we can look at it, what went before and get great ideas, and we can look at what is done everywhere to get an idea of what the core is, the core values, but then it's got to be in response to what you're living through. And
right. We have to live in the now. We have to celebrate in the now, and we have to build on everything. You mentioned Kwanzaa, and it's a weird left turn, but Vodun, which most people call voodoo, is nothing more than Black people taking Catholicism and African religion and doing the damnedest mashup anybody's ever seen. But yeah, the idea that, you know, it's the dead of winter, and we're living through COVID and all of that crap. So how do we celebrate the fact that in theory, at least, the light will return?
well, it's a whole lot better than thinking that there's going to be a zombie apocalypse or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to see a zombie apocalypse, go shopping at Walmart on Saturday.
Oh no, we tried that once as an experiment. We went out to check out what's going on the afternoon of the 24th. It's insane. I don't need anything, but if you want to just go look at it, just the desperation out there is
Yeah.
Well,
Because, you know, that was
we are going to be doing something rather insane because I have the day off. We're driving down to what is called Mystic Village, which is a little shopping center in Mystic, Connecticut, because they have a wonderful restaurant there. And we're going there, and then we're going to Book Barn, and we're coming back and stopping at a really good Indian restaurant. But it's like we're going to a shopping center on Christmas Eve day. True insanity.
well.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've got a bookshop and a nice restaurant. That sounds like a good.
Yeah,
Good.
Book Barn is a huge used book enterprise
Yeah,
down
it
here
sounds
on the
familiar.
coast.
That's
Yeah.
not that food place, is it?
What?
That's not the one on the highway that's got the sign that says food books.
Yes.
Yes.
No, that
Food
one.
books.
No, Book Barn is in Niantic. It's down on the shoreline.
Okay.
And what it
The-
is it's 3 different sections that are all used books, and depending on what you're looking for, you go to different ones.
Well, that sounds safe enough if you've got to be out on December
Food
24th.
book.
The crazy part is going to Mystic Village, which is a touristy shopping area near Mystic Seaport, designed to look like a 19th century fishing village, sort of.
And it
That
must
sounds
be so quaint this time of year.
Oh my
Yes.
God. The
Anyway,
quaintness
so we
factor.
wish you all a good solstice. In case, I guess stop me if I said this before. I think I haven't. Remember, it's a season. If you look up when the earliest sunrises are and when the latest sunrises and the earliest sunsets, you'll discover that it's on the earliest sunsets, I believe, are in the earliest sunset is around December 6th, and the latest sunrise is around the 6th of January. So between St. Nicholas Day and what would be 12th night. If you're a Christian, that is the season of the solstice. And
Okay.
it's like,
Mhm.
whatever 21 minus 6 is. 15 days before 15, 2 weeks before after. It's
15.
that it takes that long, but that makes the solstice the shortest day of the year. But I spent many years assuming it was the earliest sunset and the latest sunrise, and I was wrong.
Right, and I
Therefore-
mentioned that earlier this evening.
Yeah, I just
As-
want to keep the
as-
rest of the mistake I made. So
Right, yeah, because it turns out that because the fact that the day isn't exactly
Good night, Star Wars.
24 hours,
that's all right.
and good night, Sean.
Night.
There's this offset that's been growing over the years, and the bracket you described is perfect.
Yep. So I guess that is it. We will remind people to tell your friends because people have better things to do tonight than to.
We had fun talking about all this stuff anyway.
Oh
There-
yeah,
This will you can tell anybody who said, "Oh, I would like to have," but that it's we posted on YouTube shortly, and
right.
And next week we're going to be talking about New Year's customs.
Okay.
And how, see, as opposed to an astronomical event, New Year's is arbitrary.
Yeah.
They have New Year's all over. As a matter of fact, our New Year, January 1st, was set on that date by the Romans, which they had it at the vernal equinox, but that was inconvenient when the empire got too big. Well, excuse me, the Republic at that time got too big, and they were electing the consuls. And election day had to be on New Year's, but but if the consul was elected in April, then it took too long for him to get out to wherever he was killing the armies were, the legions were. So they moved New Year's because it had the elections had to be on New Year's. So they moved New Year's to January. So there'd be plenty of time for him to get out to wherever the legions were trying to take over new territory.
Matter where you decide to start counting.
Well,
They're just
yeah,
so-
I mean,
so many interesting bits of when does New Year start? Is it starting in September? Is it starting at the vernal equinox? Is it starting midwinter? God knows. At all times of the year. That's what we're going to talk about next time. And so I guess I will say good night for now. And
Good night.
good night, everybody.